All right, everybody, get ready, because we are diving deep today.
Diving deep.
We are going on the road with Jesus.
Yeah.
Taking a look at his first big preaching tour all through Galilee.
Yeah.
And for this, we're going back to our old friend, the Urantia Book.
Of course.
And this is no quick jaunt around the Sea of Galilee.
No. This is the big time, 2 months on the road, multiple cities. We're talking Rimmon, Jotapata, Cana.
Wow.
All these places, they were like cultural crossroads.
Yeah.
You know, a real mix of people and beliefs.
And this is like their first time going out on their own.
Right.
Yeah.
It is. Jesus is basically saying to the apostles, okay, guys, you're ready. Go out and preach the good news.
Go get them, but get back here in time for dinner in 2 months.
Exactly. 2 months later.
So where do we even begin with this? I mean, there's so much to unpack here.
Well, I got to start at the beginning.
Okay.
Our first stop is Rimmon. Now, Rimmon is really interesting because it's this blend of Babylonian and Zoroastrian thought.
Oh, wow.
So imagine, right, you've got this foundation of ancient Babylonian myths and rituals.
Yeah.
And then layered on top of that, you have Zoroastrianism with its emphasis on the conflict between good and evil, light and darkness.
Right, so it's not just delivering a message. It's like you got to untangle it.
You've got to untangle and weave it in. You've got to make it make sense.
Oh, absolutely.
To people with this very different worldview.
With a totally different operating system, right?
And the book even talks about
yeah.
how hard it is to convert people from nature worship to a more, spiritual ideal.
Oh, it's a huge leap, right? It's huge. To go from what you can see and touch and feel to this
Absolutely.
Concept of something beyond.
And what's fascinating is that the book doesn't say it's impossible.
Right.
It just says it takes time.
Right.
It's a process.
So it's a long game.
It is.
It's fascinating. I never thought about it that way.
Yeah, and it makes you think, how many generations did it take for these ideas to really take root?
Right, and how much cultural exchange had to happen. I mean, we see it even in, some of those Babylonian and Persian ideas. They kind of found their way into Christian teachings, right?
It did, like the whole concept of good versus evil, light versus darkness.
It's
those ideas, they resonated with people.
Right.
They provided a framework for understanding the world.
Yeah, like a familiar language.
Exactly.
For these new ideas.
Yeah.
Exactly.
It's like a cultural bridge.
It is.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it.
But, it's one thing to talk about these ideas. It's another thing to actually live them.
Yeah, for sure.
And that brings us to our next stop, Jotapata.
Oh, okay. So what happens in Jotapata?
Well, that's where we get this incredible teaching on prayer.
Okay.
And it all starts because Nathaniel...
Oh, boy. Nathaniel, he's confused.
He's always got questions.
He's got questions. He's like, what is prayer really about?
Yeah.
Is it just about asking God for things? Because sometimes it seems like it doesn't work.
Right. Like, I've put in some orders and I'm not getting my delivery.
Exactly. And this is where the Urantia book really shines. Because it presents prayer not as a vending machine,
right,
but as this incredible opportunity to align ourselves with God.
Oh, I like that. It's not gimme. It's more like...
It's how can I be more in tune with you?
Yes.
How can I align my will with yours?
Yeah.
And that's a very different way of approaching prayer.
Completely.
And what I find really interesting is that the book even says that prayer which is inconsistent with the known and established laws of God is an abomination.
Whoa, hold on. An abomination? That seems a little intense.
It does, doesn't it? But it makes you think, right?
Yeah.
Are there spiritual laws at play here that we might not be aware of?
Right, like we think we're playing checkers, but it's actually 3D chess.
Exactly. And maybe some of our requests, they're bouncing back because they're not in alignment with these bigger spiritual laws.
It's like trying to order a pizza in a language they don't speak.
Exactly.
You're like, I want food. Why don't you understand?
So it's not just about asking. It's about understanding.
Okay, so alignment is key.
It's key.
But then, and I find this part fascinating.
Yeah.
The text, it talks about how just having certain things in your heart can block effective prayer.
Like harboring iniquity in our hearts.
Iniquity? What does that even mean? Like, I stole a cookie when I was 7. Is that going to come back to haunt me?
Well, it's not so much about specific actions.
Okay.
It's more about the state of our hearts.
Oh, okay.
Like, imagine you're trying to have a real heart-to-heart with someone.
Yeah.
But you're secretly holding on to resentment or bitterness towards them.
Right.
Do you think you can truly connect in that state?
No, probably not.
Right. You're not fully present.
Right, you're not really there.
And it's the same with prayer.
Wow.
If we haven't dealt with our own baggage, it creates a barrier.
We're not showing up authentically.
Exactly.
Okay, but there's one more piece to this prayer puzzle, right?
Yes. Forgiveness.
Because it's not just about us being open, is it?
No, it's also about extending that same grace to others.
And that's where things get a little tricky, right?
They do.
Because the Urantia book makes it clear that God's forgiveness, it's not dependent on us forgiving others.
God's love is unconditional.
So we're good, right? Like, God's got us no matter what.
Well, here's the thing.
Okay.
God's forgiveness is always there, but our ability to experience it fully,
Oh, okay.
that's dependent on us extending forgiveness to others.
It's like we're blocking the flow
Exactly.
by holding on to that grudge, that anger, that resentment.
It's like holding our breath.
Wow. Yeah, you can't really breathe in fully until you let it go.
Exactly.
That's a powerful way to put it.
And it ties into this idea of aligning our will with the Father's will.
Right. And it's not about earning forgiveness. It's about
removing the obstacle.
removing the obstacles so that it can flow through us.
Precisely.
That's incredible.
It is.
Because we often think of forgiveness as this passive thing.
Right.
But here, it's an active choice.
Absolutely.
It's about aligning ourselves with a higher way of being.
It's about becoming more like God.
And that's a powerful message.
It is.
That's a really powerful message. And that seems to be at the heart of Jesus's teaching on prayer in Jotapata.
It is.
It's all about aligning our will with the Father's.
And when those two are in harmony, that's when amazing things happen.
That's when the real magic happens.
Exactly.
And it's easier said than done, right?
Oh.
Aligning your will.
Yeah. Oh, tell me about it. It's a constant process.
Yeah, so much easier to just say, hey, God, can I get this, this, and this?
Right, like a cosmic shopping list.
Exactly.
But the real growth, the real transformation happens when we make that effort to align.
So where do we go next on this tour?
Well, from Jotapata, they traveled to Rama.
Rama, okay.
And this is where things get really interesting, because Jesus encounters a Greek philosopher.
Oh, I remember this story. It's like a clash of the titans, right?
It is. You've got philosophy versus divine revelation.
And who wins?
Well, that's the thing. Jesus, he doesn't even try to win.
Oh.
He actually treats the philosopher with a lot of respect.
That tracks, yeah.
He acknowledges the value of philosophy, its
Yeah.
ability to engage the mind.
Right, to ask those big questions.
Exactly. But he also points out its limits.
Like what?
Well, philosophy can get us thinking about the whence, why, and whither of existence.
That's a mouthful.
It is.
Yeah.
But it can't necessarily provide the experience of those things.
Oh, I see. So it's like philosophy can show us the map,
Right.
but it's the gospel that actually takes us on the journey.
Exactly. And you know who is really intrigued by all this?
Oh.
Thomas.
Doubting Thomas.
The one and only.
Uh-huh.
He's like, okay, this is all well and good, but how can we be certain about any of it?
Right. Like, how do you know this gospel stuff is true?
And that's a question that still resonates today, doesn't it?
Yeah.
How can we be sure about anything?
It's the big one.
It is. And what's amazing is how relevant Jesus' answer is, even now.
What does he say?
He lays out 3 pillars of assurance. First, there's personal experience of divine truth, what we might call faith.
Okay, that makes sense. Like a gut feeling.
Yes, but not blind faith.
Right.
It's paired with the second pillar, spiritual understanding.
So it's not just feeling it, it's also thinking about it.
Exactly. It's about consistently seeking, opening yourself up to the divine.
Okay, so faith and understanding. What's the third pillar?
This one might surprise you.
Okay, hit me.
It's grappling with doubt.
Wait, really?
Yeah, Jesus basically says, don't shy away from the tough questions.
Huh. That's not something you hear every day.
Right. But it's so important.
Why is that?
Because true faith, it can handle scrutiny.
If it's real, it's not going to crumble under a little questioning.
Exactly. And there's this one quote from this section that I just love. Courage is the confidence of thoroughgoing honesty about those things which one professes to believe. Wow. Isn't that powerful?
It's like he's saying, if your beliefs can't withstand a little interrogation, maybe they need some work.
Exactly. It's about being open to being wrong, to having our minds change.
That's true courage right there.
It is.
Okay, so we've gone from deep philosophical discussions, and now we find ourselves in iron.
Iron, yes. Not exactly the most glamorous stop on the tour.
No, not quite as exciting as, say, Jerusalem.
No, but it's a mining town.
And what's Jesus doing in a mining town?
Well, the text tells us he spent most of his time there, not preaching from some mountaintop,
Okay.
but down in the mines with the workers.
Really? Really?
Yeah, getting his hands dirty.
That's pretty remarkable.
It is. It shows that Jesus wasn't afraid to get down in the trenches with everyday people.
He wasn't just some distant figure. He was right there with them.
Exactly. And it's in this very ordinary setting that we encounter what the Urantia book calls Jesus' first deliberate miracle.
Oh, wow. Which one is this?
The healing of the leper.
Right. Of course.
And this wasn't just about curing a physical ailment.
No, leprosy back then, it was a whole other thing.
It was a social death sentence.
You were completely ostracized.
And you could hear that desperation in the leper's voice when he begs Jesus, I would enter the kingdom if I could be made clean.
He's like, my body is preventing me from experiencing the kingdom.
Exactly. And Jesus, moved by compassion, heals him.
Of course.
But then, and this is where it gets interesting.
Okay.
He instructs the man to follow religious protocol.
What do you mean?
He tells him to show himself to the priest, as was customary.
Wait, so even after a miracle, there are still rules?
It seems so. It's like Jesus is acknowledging the existing structures, even as he operates within them.
It's like he's saying, yes, I healed you, but go through the proper channels.
Exactly. And of course, the man is so ecstatic, he runs off and tells everyone.
Of course he does. Can you imagine?
You can't help but chuckle a bit, right? It's human nature to get excited and maybe not follow instructions to the letter.
Even when those instructions come after a divine miracle. It's kind of funny.
It is. Yeah. But it also highlights this tension we see throughout the Gospels.
What tension?
The tension between Jesus' desire to teach and heal and the human desire for spectacle.
For the miraculous.
Exactly. And that tension, it pops up again in our next story.
Okay, where are we off to now?
But we're heading back to a familiar place, Cana.
Cana, as in the wedding at Cana.
The one and only. But this time, there's no wine shortage.
Oh. What's happening this time?
Well, we meet a man named Titus from Capernaum.
Okay.
And his son is deathly ill.
Oh, no.
So Titus begs Jesus to come back to Capernaum with him to heal his son.
What does Jesus do?
He heals the boy remotely.
Wow, really?
But here's the thing, and this is where the Urantia book throws us for a loop.
What do you mean?
It's very clear that this wasn't a miracle.
It wasn't.
No, it was an act of pre-knowledge.
Pre-knowledge. So Jesus knew the boy would recover.
Exactly. He understood through his deep connection to the spiritual and natural laws that the boy would be fine.
So no supernatural intervention needed.
Not in this case.
Wow, that's really interesting.
It is. It makes you think, how often do we mistake pre-knowledge for a miracle?
Right, because we don't have that same level of understanding.
Exactly. We see things through a limited lens.
And this theme of challenging assumptions, it continues, doesn't it?
It does, with the story of the widow's son in Nain.
Oh, right. This is a well-known story.
It is, but the Urantia book offers a very different perspective.
Like what?
Well, it explicitly states that the boy wasn't actually dead.
He wasn't.
No, he was in a very deep sleep, or perhaps a coma.
But everyone thinks he's dead.
Everyone, including the apostles. And because of their miracle mindset.
They interpret it as a resurrection.
Exactly.
So it's less about Jesus defying death.
Right.
And more about people's perceptions shaping their reality.
Precisely. They saw what they wanted to see, what they expected to see.
And even when Jesus tried to explain, they clung to the miracle narrative.
It's human nature, isn't it? We crave the extraordinary, even when the truth might be much simpler.
It's like we want to believe in magic.
And sometimes the real magic is in the ordinary and the natural order of things.
It's about opening our minds to see it.
Exactly.
Makes you wonder how many other stories from history got, embellished along the way.
Oh, absolutely. We see it all the time, right? People reinterpreting events to fit their own narratives.
Totally. And it's not always intentional. It's just, like you were saying, human nature.
Exactly. We see what we want to see. We believe what we want to believe.
And that brings us to, well, a rather interesting stop on the tour, Endor.
Ah, Endor, the town with a bit of a spooky reputation.
Yeah, home of witches, sorcery.
Right, the kind of place that sends shivers down your spine.
And this is where Jesus decides to give us, well, a crash course in the spirit world.
Yeah, he gets real about those mischievous midwayers, the ones who like to impersonate the dead.
Oh, yeah, those guys. Always causing a stir.
And he doesn't mince words, does he? He basically says, their time is up.
So does that mean no more spooky encounters, no more ghostly visitations after this? What do you think?
Well, it's not quite that simple. There are nuances.
Of course.
He explains that once he returns to the Father and the Spirit of truth is poured out, these entities won't be able to deceive us the same way.
So less trickery, less mischief.
Exactly. But then he addresses this question that I think we've all pondered.
Which is,
What about connecting with our loved ones who have passed on? Is that possible?
yeah. Is there any hope for a little chat from beyond the grave?
And Jesus, he's very clear on this point.
What does he say?
He says that, as a general rule, spirits of the deceased, they don't come back for casual visits.
So no heartwarming reunions on this side of eternity.
Not usually, no.
Well, that's a bit of a bummer.
It is. I think we all want to believe that we can stay connected with those we've lost.
So no messages from the beyond, no signs, no nothing.
Well, the text does mention that after a certain period, a dispensational age, there might be rare exceptions.
Okay, so there's a glimmer of hope.
Maybe, but it emphasizes that these exceptions are usually for a much higher purpose.
Not your average, hey, how's it going from the other side?
More like cosmic administration stuff, important business.
Got it. So we shouldn't hold our breath for a casual phone call.
Probably not. But it's interesting, isn't it, how we keep coming back to this theme?
Which one?
The danger of letting our desires, our hopes, cloud our understanding of how things really work.
Right. We want to believe in miracles, in grand reunions, in things that defy logic.
Exactly. And sometimes the truest path is accepting the natural order of things, even when it's difficult.
So where do we go from Endor?
Well, from there, they journey back to familiar territory. Capernaum.
Home sweet home, at least for now.
Right. But Capernaum will have to wait for another deep dive.
Because we are out of time for today.
It's true. Time flies when you're traveling through Galilee with Jesus.
It really does. But before we go, any final thoughts on this whirlwind tour?
It strikes me that this whole journey has been about challenging assumptions,
It has, hasn't it?
looking beyond the surface of these stories.
And maybe even questioning some of our own deeply held beliefs.
Exactly. Because sometimes the truth is far stranger and far simpler than we ever imagined.
It's been quite a journey, and I want to thank you, as always, for being our guide.
It's my pleasure. Always a joy to dive deep with you.
And to our listeners, thank you for joining us on this incredible journey through the Urantia book. Until next time, keep seeking, keep questioning, and keep exploring the mysteries of the universe.